Bismillah, Assalamualaikum. This is the end of week 6 out of this 14 weeks semester, and we will go through some of the students' comments and feedback. So this is on one of the sessions. Your explanation are the best. What's that? Is it happy face or something? Or I'm not sure. And then some roses. Is it the roses there? Not sure. I feel overwhelmed by your concern to give the best in the video by recording the class at 2 a.m. Really appreciate the hard work. Okay, yeah, I don't remember when. Of course, most of my video, including this one, is recorded way past midnight because that is when I'm free to record a video, right? Including the class, including the tutorial, because on the day the schedule is quite packed from Isha until 12 midnight. Normally the schedule is also packed, so normally after that is when I can spend some time to record some video, right? Nice one. The explanation on finding the you of moment of a couple are really good. Is this the same student? Because it have that same emoji type of face, right? Okay, here is a thing. I know you calculated time needed to answer each question. For example, for 20 marks question, you do the math and get like 8 minutes allocated for that question. The problem is you are looking at it from the point of view of a lecturer. What is it? What does this mean? For 20 marks question, you do the math and get like 8 minutes allocated for that question. The problem is you are looking at it from the point of view of a lecturer. What does that mean? Okay, I have there's two possibilities of what this is referring to. One is either the quiz that we have in the class, or he is referring to the tutorial where I mentioned about allocating time for respective question in the exam, because in the exam you have 100 marks, and then each question have like 20 marks, 25 marks, etc., and we have 3 hours, for example, for the final exam, or 2 hours for the midterm, right? So I do suggest the students to see the marks, and if it's 20 marks, it's 1/5 of the full marks. So normally time allocated there should be roughly 1/5 of the total time. It's not rigid as such, but it is a good guide if you have exceeded quite much of that estimated time. You might actually have used too much time on that question rather than spending time on other question where you can secure much more marks that you do not struggle that much with, right? So that's just a strategy that I suggested in my tutorial videos, if that is referring to that. If this is referring to the quiz that I give, normally the way I do, and this is also the same when we do midterm exam and final exam. Of course, it's quite different for my quiz, but I'll just tell you how normally I gauge the time needed for the student to solve the question, or the time that is fair for the question for the students. Normally, to be fair, the way I gauge the time needed is that for the question, for the exam question, right? So first and foremost, I try to forget about the question, because of course when you do make the question yourself, you know the question is going towards which direction, etc., right? So obviously that's a head start, right? So I'll just put aside, etc., do something else, and then okay, I want to look at the time. I start my time. I just read the question like 3 to 4 times, so that that's like a buffer. Even though I know the question already, I just read to simulate the process. I read 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, 4 time. Okay, so decide what need to be done, and then of course, every time I make sure that when I answer the question, I do it simultaneously while watching TV, but I do not have a TV cable or something. I watch videos, right? YouTube videos or anything, so that my attention span is not 100% on the question paper. So that I'm following the story, and then I answer, following the story, I answer, right? So that because I think it's not fair for me to focus 100% on the question, and then I assume the student can finish the question in the same time. So normally it's like that, like I'm following whatever story, whatever movie, whatever that I can watch while answering the question, and then until the end, when I have answered the question, I check the time. That time, let's say I solve it in 25 minutes, for example, right? So I think that the student needs to be given like 40 to 50 minutes to solve the same question, right? So that's normally how I gauge the time that is fair for the student compared to the time, compared to how I do it, right? The precaution that I do is that I make sure I answer the question not 100% focus on the question, but simultaneously by watching videos, so that it's quite slow than what I normally do. And after that, even that time, I multiply by 2 or 1.5, right? So that there's another buffer there. So that's normally what I do for exam question. So that's why in the exam question, I think normally for good student, they can finish quite early, because there's so much buffer there. But for the rest, they should have enough time. Right, so that's for the exam. But for the quiz, the buffer that I give is not as much, because I want to train the student. I have mentioned to if you are my student, I have mentioned this before in the briefing, that my approach towards the quiz is primarily assessment for learning, not purely assessment of learning. I do not just want to know how much you have learned, but I want to push for you to realize what you need to learn further, or you learn by process or by getting feedback from the grading, the marking, right? So that's the primary motivation for me to do a lot of quizzes, so that you will do the most mistakes that you can, so that you will realize that those are mistakes and you will never repeat it in the final exam or in the midterm. So that's generally my approach. So one of the thing is, I really want the student to realize that if they are severely lack in practice, meaning that if you use too much time on a particular question when it should take 10 minutes and you do 20 minutes or 30 minutes, right? That's too much. That's beyond what is normal, right? So that normally indicates either you do not understand, or you just do not have enough practices. So I really want to drive that point home for the quiz. That's why the buffer that I give is just for the most time. For example, if the question can be solved in 10 minutes, normally I just give 15 minutes. So the buffer is not double, right? It's like I don't know, it's like 25% to 50% extra, just that, so yeah, that's the approach that I do. And on my end, because the number of quizzes that I give is, I will just take the best 8. I do like 20 normally. It depends on each semester how much the student want, right? So there's enough buffer for the student to learn from the process, to drill down their preparation. And normally for quite many students throughout the semesters, their mark improve over time because of adapting to what is required to get a good marks. So that's my approach generally when we talk about quiz. So if I have addressed this concern, I hope, but of course, if you have further question, further queries, further complaints, feel free to further give feedback, etc. Especially if there's a blind spot that I didn't realize, that I need to consider. Okay, for this one, all right. Can the time for answering quiz be longer? Because I think the time given is not enough. Okay, this is exactly the same that I have just mentioned. It is just enough for those who are quite prepared. That's generally how it is designed. It's just enough for those who are quite prepared. For those who are very prepared, they can actually submit it like at least 3 to 5 minutes earlier. And from throughout this semester, there are students that actually submitted like 5 minutes before time and can get good marks, right? Some of them still do mistake and they just get 17 out of 20 or something. But some did get 20 out of 20, even though they submitted like quite early. So from there, of course, it is expected only few that can do that. Most just submitted, before the deadline, but still securing most of the marks. So I think, generally speaking, if that time is not enough, I think the practice is perhaps the issue, right? Maybe you have to think like 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes before you, okay, this is what I need to do. Unfortunately, the time is not given for that in the quiz. In the exam, as I mentioned earlier, I try to design so that the thinking time is considered. But for the quiz, because you know exactly the topic, the title, the portion of what the lesson that we covered, that will be in the quiz, right? So it's already locked down there. You only focus on a very small specific subchapter. So I do not think that you should be given that much of buffer time to think what you need to do, because it should be quite straightforward. Okay, group discussion is starting to engage after 5 weeks of silence. Okay, good to hear. Good. I'm sorry, but could you please add some more time for answering? I think the time you given is quite short. Okay, so many commenting on the time. Sometimes unable to understand what the question wants can easily make the question feel difficult. I do agree. If you do not understand the question, then it's not really difficult. It is you cannot even answer, right? Because what if you do not understand what the question wants? How can you answer? And that's, I think, going back to the first week of the lecture where we cover IPE, right? Interpret, plan, execute. So in terms of interpret, you have to actually first understand what the question wants. What is the problem that you need to solve? If you do not even know what the question wants, you cannot solve. It's not difficult, it's impossible. You're just guessing at that point, right? And it's just based on luck. The time for the quiz is not enough. So when will we be having live online class instead of we just watch your YouTube videos by ourselves? Live online class means Sir will be teaching us live so that we can ask right away, just like other lecturers, because it's quite boring to learn alone. Okay, several layers of this question, right? So one is about live meaning synchronous, right? Meaning that I will be teaching live. Right now, of course, if you are my student, you know this, but in case anyone else is watching, we are using flipped classroom with all the recorded lectures available beforehand. They can watch at any time they want. They can pause, they can rewind, they can whatever, right? So that's the benefit of that. Now, so this comment asked for me to teach at the time, just like other lecturer, because it's covering. Okay, so there's two things thing here, because if the issue is just boring, mm, mm, yeah, I'm not sure whether objectively that is a reason to restructure the format, from my opinion, right? Because um, if for some student it is more effective in one way on than another, then it can be considered. But if it's just preference, I tend to be more objective in this, in evaluating things, and what can go towards the objective, right? So, and then there's a comment that I'm teaching so that they can ask right away. So this is where I think, because the way I design, the way we do flip classroom right now is because I'm always waiting for question. But I guess when they cover the material, if they have question they do not note it down or something, that's one possibility. That they just, then it's lost, right? So if that is the case, I think the students should improve, right? Because the way, even though it's watching lecture video, the learning process should be the same, meaning you should take notes, you should highlight, etc., right? And when we did this before pandemic, before online, right, because in the class as well we come just for the tutorial, any question, I noticed that good students, when they come, all the notes are already there because they watch the recorded videos, they take notes, they do the examples, etc., right? So when they have something, they can just say, I don't understand this portion, and we can explain. If you do not do that, you just passively listening, of course it wouldn't work that much. That's number one. Number two, if you have question, if you take notes but you still do not have the courage to ask question, I think that have to change, because this is a university and the student is empowered, so you should empower yourself to learn and to want to learn and to go through the process. Yeah, that's point blank, that's the thing. The third thing is, I'm open if in this session, because right now I'm just standby waiting for question, and some students do ask question, whenever they feel something they just enter and ask question, right? So that happened. If you look at the recorded class session, in some session there's no question at all, in some session there's quite a lot of question. Perhaps it depends on the chapter. But because of that flexibility, because I want to give the maximum flexibility for the student learning process, so for those who have problem here, they can just consult about that, here consult about that, etc., right? If they are ahead, they can ask something ahead, no problem. If you are behind, they can ask something behind, no problem. But if I teach, then two things that will happen. Normally the content that I can cover within that time period is much less than what we do right now. That's number one. Number two, it will eliminate the opportunity for the flexibility for the students that can ask various things other than what I cover in that limited time, in terms of the lecture, right? So that's the reason, if you want to understand the reason why we are adopting this current approach. But of course, if you have, or if most of you want to change, it can be discussed, but this is a fact. The way I teach will just be exactly like the lecture video that you watch anyway, number one, but with some limitation, because in that video I have my whiteboard, the big whiteboard, and we can just write there, right? So if I'm live on camera, the laptop camera, it is not possible to have this one. So normally it will be on slides, and I hate teaching directly off slide, because uh, because I prefer to have whiteboard, so that it's a free for explanation rather than you know it's just like, okay, the answer will come up, okay, so that's the equation. It's, I'm not sure, but I don't know if the student learn more that way. Just for me, just meaning I just present the slide and read the slide. If you think that is better for you compared to the way it is now, please do tell me, because maybe some student learn better in that way when the lecturer read the slide. Okay, I just want to reiterate this part, right? Annabelle Question. This is, I think, from 11 November. So let me see. This is the quiz in 11 November. So I'm assuming the question is actually related to the quiz that the student take at that time, right? So okay, the just to see whether the question is very hard to or difficult to understand. Replace the forces. Okay, this is the question, right? Oops. No, I cannot highlight. Okay, can. Replace the forces acting on the beam. Okay, so there are forces here, 1, 2, 3 forces there, by an equivalent force and couple moment at point A. So two things. One is, in the quiz you actually know which subchapter we are going the quiz on, right? Or which subchapter it is from, right? So from there, I think it shouldn't give any confusion, because we exactly do the quiz for simplification of force and couple moment. That's number one. Number two, just by reading that, you should already understand, okay? Replace forces, you have all the forces, by equivalent force and couple moment at a certain point. So that's the normal way the question asks for that, to simplify into one force and one couple moment at that point. So if you read this question and you do not understand what it wants, what could that possibly mean? Is it that you haven't tried any question prior to the quiz? That is possible, right? That's possible, because how is that possible? Perhaps because you have watched the lecture before, and in the class and during that 1 hour before the quiz, you try a question that do not have this kind of sentence. That's perhaps, okay, that's possible. What are the other possibility? Of course, there are the possibility if you do not understand the concept of the subchapter, but I think perhaps normally it's about exercise. Okay, that's number one. And then draw the beam. Okay, draw the beam again, with equivalent force and couple moment at point A. So basically it's just drawing this whole thing with just the force and moment at that point, which is the answer from the first sentence there. So is this the question which you mean that it is hard to understand? If that is the case, I'm quite worried, because in the final exam or in the midterm exam, the question will not specify it is from which chapter, right? It just say determine this the projection of this force on this line or something, determine this and that. So you should understand, okay, this is based on this concept, this is etc. So you can link to what we have learned in various subchapter. Compared to the quiz, where the quiz is exactly given for this class we cover this, and the quiz is exactly on this. So even if, so in that case, if you even struggle to understand the question, then it is there's a lot of work you need to do before the exam, because in the exam you don't even know which question is from which chapter, right? And you have to understand the concept. So I'm quite worried in that case. But anyway, so of course, if I miss a point or if I misunderstand on or the feedback, please do mention, do tell, so that I can rectify and do what is necessary. Okay, with that, I think that's the end. So all the best. The midterm is just around the corner. Hopefully you can all be prepared as best as possible, and for the quizzes also, hopefully you can also be prepared. We have a lot of quizzes ahead, so there's enough chance for you to secure those best 8 marks, because the number of quizzes ahead is not much, but it's more than 8. So even if all the quizzes behind that have passed, you didn't score any good marks, there's enough chances ahead. But with each quiz that comes, and if you do not do well, then one after one and after one after another, chances pass by, right? So hopefully that does not continue. Wallahu alam. How long has it been? So see you in class next time, inshallah.